Hi guys, this is the last lesson before we actually split off into virtual hybrid. It's going to be lesson 8. This lesson is for Red Scarf Girl, Honors English. Without further ado, I am going to show you where we're going to be today in all units. Okay, we're going to go to Red Scarf Girl, subunit 3. Lesson 8, which is entitled Reading Geely's Thoughts. We're going to start on tab 2, introducing internal narration. Internal narration is anything that when you are reading, you're reading the thoughts of the character. When there's no thoughts, it's just dialogue, what is being said out loud. On this 3-part comic strip, you see everything here is just dialogue. It is not internal narration. It says, happy birthday, thanks, Grandpa, say cheese, cheese. You see that the kid is really, he looks like he's happy about the gift, and he's very happy about his grandfather being there. So you can see some of these things in the pictures. If you were reading something, you would never be able to even understand what's going on, okay? Except for that he's having a birthday and that his grandfather is there. That's it. Let's go to card 2 and see some internal narration. Up here in the boxes are internal narration. It was my 13th birthday and Grandpa was coming to visit. I was so excited. I'm his only grandson, so he spoils me like crazy. And here it says, happy birthday. Now we know this is his grandfather giving him his 13th birthday present. And then it says, it was one of those old-fashioned wool sweaters, puke-colored with giant shiny brown leather patches sewn on the elbows and some kind of weird kangaroo pouch on the front. Definitely the ugliest sweater I had ever seen. I wanted to throw it out the window, feed it to my dogs, or set it on fire. But he says, thanks, Grandpa, with a smile. And down here it says, instead, I gave Grandpa a big hug. The weird thing is how happy it made him. We matched. And they take the picture, cheese, say cheese. Some of the things that you now know is that he wasn't happy with the gift, but because it was his grandfather and he loves him, he wants to make sure that Grandpa feels good because he knows that Grandpa loves him. So he's trying to reciprocate and not make him feel bad. Okay, so now what you see on your screen now is an excerpt from Red Scarf Girl. I'm going to read this with everything in it. And then I'm going to tell you that it's going to sound completely different without the internal narration. Mom, Dad, Grandma, I panted up the steep, dark stairs in too much of a hurry to turn on the light and tripped over some pots stored on the steps. I couldn't wait to tell them my news. I knew they would all be excited as I was. Our apartment was bright and warm and welcoming. Burgundy curtains shut the darkness outside and made the one big room even cozier. Okay, so internal narration. Without it, it's going to be Mom, Dad, Grandma. That's it. What do you know from that? Not much. All of the other things are the things that are described as to what is happening. There is no external narration here besides Mom, Dad, Grandma. Everything else is in internal narration. Okay. So you know that internal narration in a story now is extremely important. Okay, let's look at tab 3, where we're going to have to read a short piece. This is graduation. This is an excerpt from chapter 5, and it goes, good morning, Teacher Goo. I met her in the hallway, but I tried to avoid any more than a polite greeting. Geely, wait a minute. She would not let me go. I avoided her eyes as I waited for her to speak. Teacher Goo had been our homeroom teacher for 2 years. In those 2 years, she had been more than a teacher to us. She had been a devoted friend. I knew she had a daughter just my age, and I often felt She was like a mother to me. Before the Cultural Revolution, she had been a model teacher. Now she was the subject of many Dalziel, calling her an opportunist, a black executioner, a corrupter of the young. Even though I did not believe these accusations, I did not want to be seen with her. I did not want to give the red successors another excuse to attack me. Besides, I was ashamed of my own black background. For nearly a month, I had tried to avoid her. G. Lee, don't be so unhappy. I'm not unhappy, I tried to say, but when my eyes met hers, my voice broke. I turned away. I did not know how to face her after all my recent humiliations. I have some good news for you. She gently turned my face toward her. Okay, so that is the next excerpt. Let's go to tab 4. The following quotes communicate clues about G. Lee's point of view. Drag the correct answer option to each box. G. Lee does not want to talk to teacher Gu. Down on the bottom, it says, I met her in the hallway, but I tried to avoid any more than a polite greeting. B, G. Lee, wait a minute, she would not let me go. C, teacher Gu had been our homeroom teacher for 2 years. D, I did not want to give the red successors another excuse to attack me. E, now she was the subject of many Dalziel, calling her an opportunist, a black executioner, a corrupter of the young. So you're going to drag the correct response that goes with G. Lee does not want to talk to teacher Gu. Then drag the correct response to G. Lee's afraid of being seen with teacher Gu. The Cultural Revolution has changed other opinions of teacher Gu. So there are 3 that go from down the bottom to up at the top. Save and continue. And on card 2, we're going to highlight 2 or 3 details in paragraph 12 that clearly show G. Lee's point of view toward teacher Gu. And then you are going to write 2 sentences or so to, answering what the details that you highlighted show about G. Lee's point of view. So you're going to go back into this. It is the paragraph 12. That's all that they include on card 2. And you're going to highlight 2 or 3 details that clearly show G. Lee's point of view toward the teacher. Then explain what do the details that you highlighted show about teacher G. Lee's point of view. About G. Lee's point of view towards the teacher, sorry. Then we're going to go to card 3. And you've already highlighted 3 details in paragraph. Now you're going to highlight 3 details in paragraph 13 that clearly show G. Lee's point of view toward teacher Gu. So this is paragraph 13. Okay, and you're going to highlight details on that one. Then you're going to answer the question, how do you think G. Lee feels about teacher Gu? For real, how do you think that she feels about her? Remember, she really does like teacher Gu, but she doesn't want to be seen with her because she's afraid. Because nobody who is in power, like the red successors and the red guard, like her. Because in this paragraph, it tells you that she was the subject of many Dalziel, and they call her an opportunist, a black executioner, and a corrupter of the young. So you need to be aware of all of that in answering that question. Okay, your writing is going to be the homework if you are in class, okay? So you're going to go and you're going to read, again, reread this graduation excerpt, and then answer the question, why do you think G. Lee's voice broke when she looked in teacher Gu's eyes? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. It has to be at least 100 words using race, okay? That will be graded. All right, now we're going to go to the exit ticket, and on the exit ticket, we need to indicate whether the following pieces of evidence show G. Lee's feelings or actions. So we have A through F, and we need to figure out what each one of these pieces, whether they are her feelings or her actions. How is she feeling or how is she acting? I met her in the hallway, but I tried to avoid any more than a polite greeting. Avoiding a polite greeting is actually an action, guys. I avoided her eyes as I waited for her to speak. Feeling or action. I knew that she had a daughter my age, and I often felt she was like a mother to me too. There's a key word right there. Even though I did not believe these accusations, I did not want to be seen with her. Want is a clue, feeling or action. I did not want to give the red successors another excuse to attack me. Besides, I was ashamed of my Black background. Want, ashamed. 2 clues as to whether it's feelings or actions. And for nearly a month, I had tried to avoid her. Avoiding is actually what? A feeling or action. Once you finish that, go down to number 2. How did Ji Lee's feelings and actions communicate her point of view to the reader? Okay, so what is her point of view? How is she feeling? How does that make you understand her? Then we are going to go to the solo. In the solo, there is some extra reading. Okay, so in the solo, a search in passing. I will read to you and then I will read you the questions. It was already past 8 o'clock when Dad's colleagues, Uncle Tien and his wife, Aunt Wu, came to visit. They had not come for several months, and things were very different now. Mom did not make her famous beef soup, and Grandma did not make steamed buns. They barely greeted us children when they came in. Instead of loud, lively chatter and jovial laughter, their conversation was hushed whispers. As soon as they mentioned the current situation, Dad told us to go downstairs to play with my little cousin, Hua Hua. I'm not sure how to say that. I think it's How How. We went reluctantly. How How was sleepy and did not want to play patty cake or any of our usual games, but we stayed at my 4th aunt's apartment until we heard the footsteps going down the stairs. It was late. We were getting ready for bed when Dad talked to us. Children, tomorrow I want you to go to the park with Grandma. You'll have to take something for lunch. Grandma's been sick, I thought. Is this so she can rest? A picnic, Ji-yoon shouted. Oh boy, that's right. A picnic. His voice sounded odd somehow. You all go and have a good time. This morning was still relatively cool when we set off to the park, but the sun was bright and it was sure to be hot before long. I carried a book and a bag that rattled with the dishes we had packed for lunch. Ji-young and Ji-yoon skipped ahead and were already running across the grass by the time Grandma and I arrived. The park was empty. Almost empty. A few old men sat on benches playing chess, and in the shady places, some old people did Tai Chi exercises. We strolled around the lawn, and then Grandma picked a shaded bench and pulled out her knitting. You go ahead and play, she said. I'll be right here. Let's play tag, Ji-yoon said excitedly. We had not been to the park in ages, and the 3 of us raced around the nearly deserted paths, having a wonderful time. We were evenly matched. Ji-yoon may have been the youngest, but she was very fast. Grandma called us to lunch. It was hot now. We gladly rested in the shade while she unpacked hard-boiled eggs and made sandwiches for us. We ate and shared a bottle of juice. We laughed about a trip the whole family had taken to another park last spring, when Ji-young had dropped the knife out of a rowboat, so we had to eat our apples without peeling them. Finally, Ji-young and Ji-yoon lay down on some benches and went to sleep. I helped Grandma tidy up before sitting down to read my book. Grandma took out her knitting again, but did not set to work. Instead, she sighed and stared into space. Her face was pale. I put my hand on her shoulder. She turned to me and smiled a little. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I've just been worrying too much. She took my hand and patted it gently. Every time I hear drums and gongs, I'm afraid that they're coming to our house. My heart starts racing, and the closer they come, the worse it gets. Now, after seeing poor old Chang kneeling on that washboard, I haven't been able to sleep. As soon as I close my eyes, I see the Red Guards coming in. I couldn't bear it if they made me kneel like that, or if they beat me. Your father and Uncle Tan thought this would help me relax. I can sit in the park all day and eat, and then even if the Red Guards come, I'll be safe. But what if the Red Guards are at our house when we get back? Your father thought of that too. Did you see the mop on the back balcony? That's our sign. If the Red Guards come, the mop won't be there and I'll know not to go in. I was intrigued by the idea of secret signs, but I was scared too. I glanced around to see if someone was watching us. It's really not much of a solution, Grandma went on. I can't stay here all night, and I can't even stay in the park every day for months. Really, I just hope that I'll get used to the situation and won't have to come here anymore. She shook her head sadly. The breeze blew a strand of hair over her ear, and I gently patted it back into place. She had more gray in her hair, I noticed, and more wrinkles on her face. She doesn't seem like a landlord's wife, I suddenly thought. In the movies, the landlord's wife was ugly, cruel, and stupid. Grandma was beautiful, kind, and smart. I remember coming home from kindergarten and showing Grandma the songs and dances we had learned. Grandma sat before us with her knitting, nodding her head in time to the music. Sometimes we insisted that she sing with us, and she would join in with an unsteady pitch and heavy Tianjin accent, wagging her head and moving her arms just as we did. When we tired of singing, we would pester Grandma to show us her feet. When she was young, it was the custom to tightly bind girls' feet in bandages to make them as small as possible, sometimes as small as 3 inches long. This was considered the height of women's beauty. Grandma's feet were half bound, and when she was only 7, she fought to have them released. As a result, her feet were smaller than natural feet but larger than bound ones. We loved to touch them and play with them. If she refused to let us, we would tickle her until she panted with laughter. All my friends loved coming to our house because she was so friendly. She had lived in our alley for over 30 years without a single disagreement with any of the neighbors. Everyone loved her and respected her. Dad had said that she had never been classified as a landlord's wife. She couldn't be, I told myself. Mom got home from work that evening looking nervous. She whispered to Dad and Grandma, and as soon as we finished dinner, she told us to go outside and play. We have something to take care of, she said. I knew this had something to do with the Cultural Revolution. I wish she would just say so. We were too old to be fooled like little children, but I didn't say anything and went outside with the others. When it was nearly dark, Ji-yoon and I went back home, leaving Ji-young with his friends. As we entered the apartment, I smelled smoke, acrid and choking. I looked around in alarm, but Grandma was sitting alone in the main room, showing no sign of worry. Grandma, is there a fire? We shouted anxiously. Don't you smell the smoke? Hush, hush, Grandma pulled us to her quickly. It's nothing. They're just burning some pictures. We looked puzzled. Your mother heard today that photos of people in old-fashioned long gowns and mandarin jackets are considered four-olds, so your parents are burning them in the bathroom. Can we go watch? I loved looking at pictures, especially pictures of all those uncles and aunts I had never met. Grandma shook her head. I winked at Ji-yoon, and we both threw ourselves into her arms, begging and pleading. As always, she gave in and went to the bathroom door to ask Mom and Dad. Mom opened the door crack and let us in. The bathroom was filled with thick smoke that burned our eyes and made us cough. Dad passed us a glass of water. We can't open the window any wider. The neighbors might notice the smoke and report us. Mom and Dad were sitting on small wooden stools. On the floor was a tin wash bowl full of ashes and a few pictures disappearing into flames. At Dad's side was a stack of old photo albums, their black covers stained and faded with age. Dad was looking through the albums page by page, tearing out any pictures that might be four-olds. He put them in a pile next to Mom, who put them into the fire. I picked up one of the pictures. It was of Dad, sitting on a camel when he was about 6 or 7 years old. He was wearing a wool hat and pants with suspenders, and he was laughing. Grandma looked very young and beautiful and wearing a fur coat. She was standing beside him. Mom, this one doesn't have long gowns or anything. Can't we keep it? The Red Guards might say that only rich children could ride a camel. And besides, Grandma's wearing a fur coat. She threw it into the fire. Mom was right, I thought. A picture like that was four-olds. The flames licked around the edges of the picture. The corners curled up, then turned brown. The brown spread quickly toward the center, swallowing Grandma, when the camel, and finally Dad's woolen hat. Picture after picture was thrown into the fire. Each in turn curled, melted, and disappeared. The ashes in the wash bowl grew deeper. Finally, there were no more pictures left. Mom poured the ashes into the toilet and flushed them away. That night, I dreamed that the house was on fire. By the third day, Ji-young and Ji-yoon had tired of spending their days in the park, so they stayed home with our fourth aunt. I was bored too, but I wanted to keep Grandma company, so I brought a book and bought a pomegranate. Pomegranates had so many seeds that they took a long time to eat, and I had plenty of time to spare. I sat on our usual bench, prying the juicy red seeds out of the fruit and slowly sucking on them until, one by one, staring at the fleecy white clouds. One cloud looked like a two-humped camel, and another looked like an old man whose long white beard nearly reached the ground. The camel was leading the old man slowly past. Grandma coughed, and I looked at her, but she was staring into the distance. In the 3 months since the Cultural Revolution had started, changes had been so constant that I often felt lost. One day, the conservative faction were revolutionaries that defended Chairman Mao's ideas. The next day, the opposite rebel faction became the heroes of the Cultural Revolution. I heard that even Chairman of the nation, Liu Shaoqi, and General Secretary Deng Xiaoping were having problems. No one knew what would happen tomorrow. So these two factions would fight each other, and one would gain power with Chairman Mao while the other one lost it, and it would switch. And the people who were in power would lose power when Chairman Mao didn't like what they did and gain power when Chairman Mao liked what they did. I wonder what I would be doing if I had been born into a red family instead of a black one, searching people's houses, hating landlords and rightists. Of course I would hate them. I hated them even now. I hated my grandfather just as I hated all of Chairman Mao's enemies. But I had felt sorry for old Chang, even though he was wrong, and I did not know if I could hate Grandma if she was officially classified as a landlord's wife. The harder I tried to figure things out, the more confused I felt. I wish I had been born into a red family so I could do my revolutionary duties without worrying. When we got home, the mop was still hanging from the balcony. A week had passed and still nothing had happened. I waited anxiously, not knowing what I waited for. It was late in the afternoon. Jiyoung's been fighting again, Ji Yoon announced as soon as she saw him walk in. His t-shirt was covered with dirt and one sleeve was half torn off. He carried a broken strap sandal. What happened? Grandma rushed in from the kitchen. They robbed me. They took my army cap. He wiped his face with his sleeve and angrily threw his sandal on the floor. Robbed you? You must have done something to upset them. Why would anyone just grab your cap for no reason? You shouldn't be so ornery to people. Don't go making more trouble for us. How can you say that? I was just minding my own business looking for crickets. They wanted to trade a cricket for my cap, and when I said no, they took it. Who were they? Do you know them? Jiyoung nodded grimly. They won't get away with this, I swear. The army cap was one of Jiyoung's treasures. It wasn't one of the ordinary olive green caps you could buy in a store. It was a real army cap that he had gotten from his friend Ming Ming's father, a Liberation Army veteran. It had been washed and sun bleached until it was nearly white, and anybody could see at a glance that that was the real thing. All the boys envied the cap. No wonder he was so angry. Well, it's only a hat. Forget about it. It's not worth stirring up trouble. Grandma took out her sewing kit to mend his shirt. Just wait. I'll get it back, he said, more to himself than to us. Chairman Mao didn't say that I can't wear an army cap. I turned to him attentively. What do you mean? Who said that you couldn't? They said it. They said, what a black whelp like you doing with a real, what's a black whelp like you doing with a real army cap? His eyes flashed with anger. Now I understood. Calling him a black whelp was the real cause of the incident. Of course, a boy like Jin Yong would rather fight than take an insult like that. I wish I could protect him, but there was nothing I could do. I suddenly remembered that An Yi's uncle used to be a mechanic in the army. Maybe he would still have an old cap. I decided to ask An Yi about it. In a little while, Ji Yong disappeared. I was sure he had gone to find his buddies, Ji Chang and Ming Ming. Zhao Chang and Ming Ming were our neighbors, despite the fact that they were both 3 years older than Ji Yong, and all three of them attended different schools. The three boys were close friends. In our alley, they were known as the Three Musketeers because they were always together. Zhao Chang's father had been our district superintendent. Now he was suspended and under investigation for being a capitalist follower. Ming Ming's father had been the party secretary of the Shanghai Institute of Political Science and Law and had been under arrest at the institute for several weeks. He had been accused of being a traitor. Their family problems drew the three black whelps together more than ever. The next afternoon, when Grandma and I came back from the park, Ji Yong was not at home. He was not home at dinner time either. I went to Zhao Chang's and Ming Ming's house, but none of the boys were there. Where did he go? Grandma scolded. How could he miss dinner? I was worried. I was sure that he and his friends had gone to get the cap back. I should have mentioned An Yi's uncle, I thought, but I knew it would not have made any difference. If Ji Yong decided to do something, nothing I said would stop him. He was going to get hurt and probably get the family in more trouble. At 8:30, he came in. He had a black eye and he was limping, but he had a smile on his face. Were you fighting again? Mom snapped. Don't you think we had enough to worry about without you fighting? We got my cap back, he raised it triumphantly. Look, the brim's torn off, Ji Yoon snatched the cap out of his hand. You got a black eye for a rag like this, I asked. It was worth it. They won't dare push me around again. I bit back the scolding I wanted to give him and got him a cold towel for his eye. Early in the morning, Song Popo rushed upstairs to tell us the news. All the neighbors were saying that a knife had been found in the communal garbage can. The neighborhood dictatorship group had declared this to be an illegal weapon, so the entire bin had been searched and some completely burned pictures found. In one of them, they recognized my fourth aunt. Because my fourth uncle had fled to Hong Kong right before liberation, our family was the neighborhood party committee's list of black families. The weapon was automatically associated with the pictures, and that was enough for 6 fingers to report to the powerful neighborhood party committee. All day, we were terrified. Grandma and the 3 of us went to the park immediately after breakfast. This time, none of us wanted to play. We just sat together on Grandma's bench. Will the Red Guards come, Ji Yoon asked. Maybe they will, sweetie, Grandma answered. We just don't know. She took out her knitting. I tried to do the same, but I kept finding myself staring into space with no idea of where I was in the pattern. Ji-yoon and Ji-young ran off to play, but always came back to the bench after a few minutes. At 4 o'clock, Grandma sent me to see if anything was happening at home. I cautiously walked into the alley, alert for anything unusual, but there was no sound of drums or gongs or noise at all. The mop was still on the balcony. I looked into our lane. There were no trucks. Everything seemed calm, and I told Grandma it was safe. Mom and Dad came home earlier than usual. Dinner was short and nearly silent. Soon after dinner, we turned the lights off and got into bed, hoping that the day would end peacefully. I lay for a long while without sleeping, but finally drifted into a restless doze when I heard pounding on the door. I was not sure whether it was real or dream. It was real. I heard my cousin, Yu Mei, ask bravely, "Who's there?" Six Fingers' voice replied, "The Red Guards. They're here to search your house. Open up." They rushed into Fourth Aunt's apartment downstairs. At first, we could not hear much. Then we heard more doors slamming, a cry from How, crash after crash of dishes breaking overhead, and the indistinct voices of the Red Guards. By this time, we were all awake, but no one turned on a light or said anything. We all lay and held our breaths and listened, trying to determine what was going on. No one even dared to turn over. My whole body was tense. Every sound from my Fourth Aunt's room made me stiffen with dread. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. In spite of the fear, I began to feel sleepy. I was jolted awake by shouts and thunderous knocks. Someone was shouting Dad's name. "Zhang Ji-ren, get up. Zhang Ji-ren." Dad went to the door. "What do you want?" "Open up," Six Fingers says. "This is a search in passing. The Red Guards are going to search your home." We often ask somebody to buy something in passing or get information in passing, but I had never heard of searching a home in passing. Dad opened the door. The first one in was Six Fingers wearing an undershirt and dirty blue shorts and flip-flops. Behind him were about a dozen teenage Red Guards. Though the weather was still quite warm, they all wore tightly belted army uniforms. Their leader was a zealous, loud-voiced girl with short hair and large eyes. "What's your relationship with Zhang Li's living downstairs?" With the Zhangs living downstairs, the girl yelled, her hand aggressively on her hip. "He is her brother-in-law," Six Fingers answered before Dad could open his mouth. "Oh, so you're a close relative," she said, as if only now realizing that. "Leniency for confession, severity for resistance. Hand over your weapons now or we will be forced to search the house." She stood up straight and stared at Dad. "What weapons?" Dad asked calmly. "We have no. Search." She cut Dad off with a shouted order and shoved him aside. At the wave of her arm, with Red Guards behind her, stormed in. Without speaking to each other, they split into 3 groups and charged toward our drawers, cabinets, and chests. The floor was instantly strewn with their contents. They demanded that Mom and Dad open anything that was locked while we children sat on our beds staring in paralyzed fascination. To my surprise, it was not as frightening as I had imagined through the weeks of waiting. Only Little White was panicked by the crowd and the noise. She scurried among the open chests until she was kicked by a Red Guard. Then she ran up into the attic and did not come down. That's the cat. I watched one boy going through the wardrobe. He took each piece of clothing off its hanger and threw it on the floor. He went carefully through a drawer and unrolled the neatly paired socks, tossed them over his shoulder one by one. Basically, they're doing this on purpose. I turned my head and saw another boy opening my desk drawer. He swept his hand through it and jumbled everything together before removing the drawer and turning it upside down on the floor. Before he could examine the contents, another one called him away to help move a chest. All my treasures were scattered on the floor. The butterfly fell out of the glass box. One wing was crushed under a bottle of glass beads. My collection of candy wrappers had fallen out of their notebook and were crumpled under my stamp album. My stamp album. It had been a birthday gift from Grandma when I started school, and it was my dearest treasure. For 6 years, I had been getting canceled stamps from my friends, carefully soaking them to get every bit of envelope paper off. I had collected them one by one. I had complete sets. I had even bought some inexpensive sets with my own allowance. I loved my collection, even though I knew I should not. With the start of the Cultural Revolution, all the stamp shops were closed down. Now I just knew something terrible was going to happen to it. I looked at the Red Guards. They were still busy moving the chests. I slipped off the bed and tiptoed across the room. If I could hide it before they saw me, I stooped down and reached for the book. "Hey, what are you doing?" a voice demanded. I didn't do anything, I said guiltily. "A stamp album. Is this yours?" I nodded fearfully. "You got a lot of 4-olds for a kid. Foreign stamps, too, you little xenophile." "I'm not," I blushed as I fumbled for words. The girl looked at Ji-young and Ji-yoon, who were still sitting on their beds watching, and she turned another Red Guard. "Get the kids into the bathroom so they don't get in the way of the revolution." She threw the stamp album casually into the bag of things to be confiscated and went back downstairs. She didn't even look at me. Inside the bathroom, we could still hear the banging of furniture and the shouting of the Red Guards. Ji-yoon leaned with her head in my lap, quietly sobbing, and Ji-young sat in silence. After a long time, the noise died down. Dad opened the door, and we fearfully came out. The apartment was a mess. The middle of the floor was strewn with the contents of the overturned sheet chests and drawers. Half of the clothes had been taken away. The rest were scattered on the floor, along with some old copper coins. The chests themselves had been thrown on top of each other. When the Red Guards decided to check the walls for holes where weapons could be hidden, Grandma's German clock lay upside down on the floor with a little door on its back torn off. I looked for my things. The wing of the butterfly had been completely knocked off the body. The bottle holding the glass beads had smashed and beads were rolling all over the floor. The trampled candy wrappers looked like trash, and the stamp album was gone forever. That was a very long read. Okay, but number one says, what did the Red Guards catch Ji Lee trying to do? Clean up behind them, pick up her stamp collection, speak to her siblings, or protect Little White? The question has two parts. Why does Ji Lee reach for her stamps? She doesn't want her cat to walk on them. She doesn't want her stamp collection to be destroyed. She wants to keep her siblings calm. She wants to keep her room neat. Part two, which sentence from the text best supports why she does this? She scurried among the open chests until she was kicked by a Red Guard. He took each piece of clothing off its hanger and threw it on the floor. Ji-yoon lay with her head in my lap, quietly sobbing, or it had been a birthday gift from Grandma. Card 5. This question has two parts. What did Ji Lee, her siblings, and her grandmother begin to do every day? Visit Uncle Tom and his wife, do Tai Chi, go to the park, or watch the street for the signs of the Red Guards. How does this affect Ji Lee's grandma? She becomes calmer, she becomes more physically fit, she becomes friendlier, or she becomes a secret spy. How did Ji Lee's father decide which photos to burn? He chose all the photos that were in the family's photo album. He chose the ones that he thought would create a lot of smoke. He chose all the photos that he thought could be considered 4-year-olds, or he chose all the photos of his parents' old-fashioned gowns and Mandarin jackets. In paragraph 47, Ji Lee wonders what her life would be like if her family status were red instead of black. Which two sentences show that Ji Lee isn't sure how to feel about this? Okay, letter A says, I hated my grandfather just as I hated all of Chairman Mao's enemies. Letter B says, but I had felt sorry for old Chang even though he was wrong. Letter C says, I did not know if I could hate Grandma if she was officially classified as a landlord's wife. And letter D says, I wished I had been born into a red family so I could do my revolutionary duties without worrying. And the last card. Why did Ji Lee want her brother to get his cat back? She was worried it would cause more trouble for the family. She thought that his friends were a bad influence on him and didn't want him involved with them. She knew that whoever took it was just fooling around, or she thought it would show that he didn't support the Cultural Revolution. Okay, so that is the ending of that. If you have any questions, as always, please hit me up on Schoology or Talking Points. And I am here when you need me. See you guys in class.